Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paul Carantona, an Assistant Director with UNH Alumni Relations. Thank you for joining our webinar, Mind Over Matter, The Benefits of Mindfulness. Our host today is Stephanie Kirylych. Stephanie is the Director of Academic Advising at UNH Manchester. She also is a mindfulness and emotional wellness teacher and the host of the podcast, Rethinking It. Stephanie has studied integrative nutrition at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and is a certified emotional intelligence facilitator. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please submit them by using the Zoom Q&A feature. If you are interested in sharing or rewatching the webinar, all alumni webinars are recorded and are made available through our website's webinar library. Thank you all again for joining. And with that, I'll turn things over to Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Paul. Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to be here talking about one of my very favorite topics with you. And before we really get into the topic, we're going to do a quick poll. And just to gauge from everyone, what is your experience with mindfulness? So we'll just give everyone a little bit of time to answer that question. That'll just give me a sense of how many new people and how many experienced practitioners we have. So go ahead and just take a second to answer the question. Okay, so it looks like we have a little bit of everything. So a good number of you are brand new to mindfulness, and so that is great. We have some dabblers on the webinar, and then a good number of you also have a regular mindfulness practice. That is really great. And I think that throughout the rest of the webinar, we're going to be able to address different topics that really will work great, whether you're brand new, you're a dabbler, or you have a mindfulness practice every day. So thank you for letting me know. So our goals for today, we're going to talk about what is mindfulness and meditation and what aren't they. We're going to talk about what the research has shown are some of the benefits of mindfulness, and I'll also share what I have found to be my own personal benefits of mindfulness in my practice. And then most importantly, we're going to talk about how you can actually implement mindfulness and meditation into your everyday life. And then together we're going to practice a few minutes of mindfulness to end the session. As Paul mentioned throughout the webinar, if you do have questions, feel free to enter them in the Q&A box, and then I'll be addressing as many of them as I can. So what exactly is mindfulness? You might have heard this word. It's buzzed around a lot. And so I really like this very simple definition from Jon Kabat-Zinn. I think it hits on all of the main points of what I believe mindfulness is. And mindfulness is about paying attention, and not just paying attention in any particular way, but in a very specific way. So you are very intentionally paying attention, so on purpose, and in the present moment. So you're not worrying about the future or analyzing the past. And you're paying attention to that present moment without judgment. So that's without analysis, critique, looking for feedback. You are really just thinking about the present moment and not fixating on anything about it. Okay? And this graphic I really love. It has the human on one side with a very, very full mind, and then it has the dog on the other side who's just noticing the trees and the sun. And I love it because, one, I think my dog is always the more mindful of the pair, but I also think it highlights what is a really popular misconception about mindfulness, and that is that either you have a full mind or you are mindful, but that you can't be both. And throughout the course of the webinar, I'm going to share how I think you can actually have both a full mind and be mindful and do it at the same time. So if we're thinking about that full mind, I have read this statistic that it's estimated that up to 95% of our behavior is running on autopilot. And when I first read that, I was pretty critical of it, and I thought, I don't think so. But then I started to really analyze the ins and outs of my day and thought about all of the things that I do without really thinking about it, without having any awareness of it. You know, it could be the simple things like getting up, taking a shower, brushing your teeth, making your coffee. How many times have you finished a meal and then thought, oh, I don't even really know what that food tasted like, or am I full or am I hungry, right? We just go into autopilot. And I sort of have this visual that I always see in my mind when I think about this, and that is sort of digging this trench. And the more and more you do things on autopilot, the deeper and deeper that trench is getting, and it's harder then to get out of it. And what mindfulness does is it takes you off of autopilot, so now you're back in the driver's seat, and it wakes you up to the experiences of your life. And so I like to think of it and describe it as you have that autopilot trench that you've developed over time. And the more and more you practice mindfulness, the more you're filling in that trench. So it's not that you're not still going to drift into the autopilot mode. Autopilot actually saves us a lot of brain space and brain energy by being able to do those routine things without having to really spend a lot of energy thinking about them. But by filling in that trench with a mindfulness practice, once you're in autopilot, it's much easier to transition back to a mindful state out of autopilot. So when we think about mindfulness, oftentimes mindfulness and meditation are interchanged. And although they are similar, they're not the same thing. You can have a mindfulness practice that doesn't necessarily involve a meditation practice. Oftentimes it does, but they aren't the same. I think of mindfulness as the umbrella, and then there's a lot of different practices, and we're going to get into a lot of examples in a little bit, but meditation is one of those ways to practice mindfulness. Headspace has this great definition. Headspace is a mindfulness and meditation app. And they describe meditation as both a skill and an experience. And I really like that because I think it is both. It is an experience. You have to actively engage in a meditation. It doesn't just happen, but it's also a skill that you have to cultivate, right? I think anyone can do it, but it doesn't come naturally to all of us. And just like any other skill that you're trying to develop, it does take practice. And in doing that, in developing that skill and actively engaging in the experience, you're cultivating awareness and compassion. You're much more aligned in that present moment and hopefully without judgment. And I think whenever we're talking about mindfulness and meditation, it's important to unpack it a little bit. There's a lot of, I think, ideas around what it is and what it isn't. And so there's a few things that I hear time and time again whenever I'm teaching this topic. And the first one is that being mindful or meditating is not necessarily about always just feeling great or escaping reality. Of course, a great side effect is that you may feel more relaxed, calm, joyful, grateful, but it's not to block out any of the stronger or more negative emotions. That is actually the opposite of that, right? That's not present moment awareness, because not every moment is bliss, right? It's not always floating on clouds with unicorns. And so mindfulness and meditation is about being able to feel the full range of human emotions without getting stuck and fixating and having them be in an endless loop. So it's about, yes, feeling great in the great moments and honoring that, but also acknowledging that they don't last forever. And it's also about allowing yourself to feel and process and heal in the stressful moments with that same awareness that those moments also don't last forever. And so I think that is a really important distinction. It's also not about going to this, this Zen space and you're disconnected with the reality of your life. again, if we go back to that definition, it's really hard to be escaping reality when the whole point is to be grounded in the present moment. And having a mindfulness and meditation practice is not necessarily religious. It certainly can be. And there are ways to practice whatever your religious affiliation and practices are in a mindful, meditative way, but they don't necessarily have to be connected to a religion. This next one I hear 100% of the time when I teach these classes, and that's, I'm just not good at it. I've tried it, I can't sit still, my mind races, I'm just not good at it. I just can't be mindful. And I just don't really agree with that. I think we all can be more mindful. We all can meditate. If you've ever taken a deep breath when you are stressed, you are a meditator, right? And you did great at it. Meditating is usually, I describe it, especially to college students when I teach it, you're just breathing, right? It's just a breath exercise. And so you can be practiced at it or out of practice, but you can't necessarily be bad at it. And you also can't be mindful every single moment of every single day. That's not the goal. The goal is to spend more time in mindfulness than not. But a huge part and a huge benefit of having a mindfulness practice is that when you find yourself in those moments where you're not necessarily, grounded in the present moment, where you're certainly not grounded in non-judgment, to have the awareness to be able to say, okay, I am judging that. I am future tripping. I am fixated on the past. And then be able to get back, create distance and space, and breathe and process to then be able to be more mindful. Again, it's about over time filling in that ditch of autopilot, but knowing that you're still going to default back into it. It's just a lot easier to get out of it. Now we're going to transition into some of the research, but we'll pause to see if there are any questions at this point.
No questions yet. One comment saying that I believe it was the dog and the visual at the very beginning. Someone says they love using that visual. They've seen that one before.
Yeah, that is a personal favorite of mine too. Okay, so diving into some of the benefits, there is a lot of research on mindfulness and meditation. And so if you love to read journal articles and are sort of our research nerd like me, I highly recommend that you look into it. I'm going to highlight some of the ones that I found in working with students and clients and myself that are sort of the biggest benefits, the ones that you notice the most. It's certainly not an exhaustive list by any means. But a regular mindfulness practice can really improve your overall well-being, and there's a lot of things that fall under that umbrella of your well-being. But one that I really like to highlight is emotional reactivity. So that's you launching into a reaction before you've even thought about the experience, right? So a stressor, a trigger, someone cut you off in traffic, you got an email that upset you, someone, maybe gave you some negative feedback in the workplace about a project or something that you were working on. And so your emotional reactivity is how quickly and how strongly and how negatively often do you react to that stressor. And what research has shown is that a regular mindfulness practice, regular is usually defined as practicing for 5 to 10 minutes a day, every day, can improve your emotional reactivity. And I describe that as it's creating space, sort of like a little bubble, I envision, around the stressor and your reaction to the stressor, right? So the more you practice mindfulness, the bigger and bigger that bubble can get. And so that might be that you take, a second pause, a minute, a few minutes, a couple of days, depending on what the experience is, to allow yourself to actually rationally think about it without just going into whatever that default response might be. Research has also shown that mindfulness can improve your attention, your focus. I think I use this a lot when we're teaching mindfulness to the students at UNH Manchester, that having a mindfulness practice can actually help them when they're studying. It can help them sustain their attention when they have to write a paper or work on a project. It sort of clears out all of the cobwebs. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to practice the mindfulness right before you do the activity. That is one of the great benefits of mindfulness, is that it is a cumulative effect. And so it can really impact you even if you didn't just practice. It's not like you practice and then the benefits wear off. It also has been shown to boost your memory, reduce rumination. I think this is a huge one. So rumination is that sort of getting on that hamster wheel and just recycling the same thought, the same worry, the same stressor over and over again. And mindfulness can reduce that. So it can allow you to process it, to be aware of it in the moment, and to move on more quickly from it. There is a lot of interesting research on the health benefits. I'm not going too much into that in this webinar, but there are studies that look at the benefit of mindfulness on cardiac health. They look at different cardiac patients and having a regular mindfulness practice and how that can improve their overall cardiovascular health. Pain management is another area where it's utilized a lot with patients to help them just more easily manage chronic pain, chronic illness, supports your immune system. It can decrease inflammation in the body. So there's a lot of interesting health-related research into mindfulness. It also can promote empathy, compassion, and your emotional regulation. And there's a lot of research around this in looking at nursing students, pre-med students, therapists in training. So the people that are in helping professions that are also high stress. And a lot of programs are beginning to incorporate mindfulness education, but also practicing it right in the program to help support those pre-health students or the therapists in training to develop greater empathy and compassion for their clients and patients, and also for themselves. And then sleep. We all probably need more sleep. And a really great way to support your sleep is with a mindfulness practice. So gratitude and meditation both have been shown to support better quality sleep and longer sleep. There's one study that I read that showed that having a nightly gratitude practice, so writing down 3 to 5 things every night that you're grateful for, on average, people who did that fell asleep faster and slept longer, so up to 30 more minutes of sleep a night. And it makes sense if you stop and think about it. If you're focusing on positive things before you go to bed, and this study described it as positive pre-sleep cognitions, then you're in a more peaceful, relaxed state. So falling asleep is probably going to be easier, and you're going to have less on your mind, so you might stay asleep longer and sleep deeper. One area that I'm particularly interested in thinking about mindfulness in terms of leadership and the workplace, and both as a manager, I think this is really important to me, and also just as an employee. And so looking at the research on mindfulness and work is really fascinating. There has been research that shows that if people have a regular mindfulness practice, so their own personal practice, it doesn't necessarily have to be involved in their workday at all, but if they just practice at home, there's increased engagement in work and a reduction in employee burnout. And I think that is a really huge. I think often we think about mindfulness and work as it has to be happen at work, and that's great. There are a lot of organizations that are bringing in mindfulness training programs. There are becoming more and more mindful leaders who will bring it in and infuse it into their leadership style. But even if you don't work in one of those environments where mindfulness is going to be happening on your lunch break, you could still, as an individual, start practicing mindfulness and still see these benefits. It helps our ability to deal with change, and that, I think, again, goes back to the rumination, the emotional reactivity. It allows us to sort of ride the wave a little bit more instead of getting taken down by the wave. You're more likely to have acceptance of your colleagues, be more open to new ideas, And one area that I think is really fascinating is the impact it has on our creativity and problem solving. And those who have a mindfulness practice are better problem solvers and more likely to come up with creative solutions. And I talk to students all the time about this. If they're writing a paper and they're saying, oh, I don't have any good ideas, I have writer's block, they're working on a project and they hit a roadblock, I always prescribe a few minutes of mindfulness or meditation. That could be journaling, meditating, taking a walk, listening to a relaxing song, and then go back to the project. And more likely than not, you'll have a fresh idea. You'll be able to re-engage because you created that space where you could slow everything down and actually have those creative ideas float to the surface instead of being drowned out by sort of the distractions, our own thoughts, and that cycle of just moving. And in my own personal practice, I have been practicing mindfulness for over 10 years now. And I agree with all the things that the research has shown. And some of the things for me that also are most important is the sense of being calm under pressure. And I hear this from colleagues or those around me. When things are stressful, I can sometimes sort of go into a more calm state where I'm able to problem solve, where I'm able to move through without that quick reaction. Again, no one is mindful every second of every day. So there are certain times where the pressure does get to me. But in general, people always describe me as, oh, you just look so calm. You just look so peaceful. Another really big one for me has been the ability to sit with discomfort. And I think this is really important for myself personally. I, a few years ago, was diagnosed with a chronic rare genetic condition that doesn't have a treatment or a cure, and has quite debilitating symptoms. And so my mindfulness practice, it has not obviously improved my genetic condition, that it's not going to change that. But what it has done is given me the ability to sit with the discomfort, to sit with the diagnosis, to sit with the fact that there isn't a treatment, to sit with the pain, the physical symptoms, with a little bit more ease, a little bit more grace, a little bit more peace. And then another one that I think for me, especially in my line of work, is decreasing compassion fatigue. So compassion fatigue is the idea that the more and more you support people, so that you might be in a helping profession, you might be the friend or family member that's just such a great listener or gives the best advice and everyone comes to you. And the more people that come to you with their problems for advice, you can sometimes intellectually or physically feel it happening in your body. You start to resent them. You start to not be such a great listener. You start to not give the best advice because you yourself are tired. Right? And so mindfulness can really decrease that. Again, and that goes back to why they're incorporating it so much in med school programs and therapy programs and nursing programs, because it allows you to show up for your friend, your family member, your client, your patient, your student, as if they are the first person that you engaged all day. You have a better sense of compassion for those around you, but also for yourself. And so that for me has been a huge benefit. My job is supporting students all day long, but I also still need to be a friend and a family member and be able to have compassion for myself. So those are some of the benefits.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. We actually do have a couple questions.
Great.
So one would just be, what advice do you have to encourage staff or could be students or other individuals or getting buy-in from employees, again, or staff or students who may think mindfulness is kind of, not for them?
That's a great question and something I hear a lot. And also I used to be that person. So I had been recommended many times over the years that I try meditation, and I was very much in the camp of, I can't do that. I'm too busy. I have too many thoughts. I can't sit still. And I didn't think it was going to even do anything. So what I usually recommend is twofold. One, you be the example. So practice it yourself. You don't necessarily have to talk about it, right? So you don't have to go into your staff meeting every week and say, let me tell you about that meditation I had last night. But the more mindful you become as an individual, people around you usually notice. It might be that it's a really stressful day at work and you're sort of the calm in the storm. It might be that your leadership changes. It just might be that how you approach things, your thought process changes, and people might notice. I also think if you're thinking about in the workplace, that's where using the research I think can sometimes be very helpful. There's research about mindfulness and productivity. As an employer, we do want people to be engaged and happy and productive. And so being able to come at it that way. And when I'm working with students, I just often reframe it. So I don't always talk about it as meditation or even mindfulness, but stress management, a breathing exercise. So I think sometimes our hesitation is because we have all of these preconceived notions on what mindfulness and meditation is. We think you have to sit on a meditation cushion for hours and empty your mind. But it can be just taking a simple deep breath before you take an exam, or taking a walk around and noticing your surroundings. And so I think that reframe can often be helpful, so that it just cuts out those preconceived notions.
Thank you so much. We have another question from someone in the work environment again. They're wondering if there are any specific programs that train leaders in mindfulness so that they could implement this practice in their work environment. A little background from them is they own a small veterinary practice, which is very emotionally demanding.
Mm-hmm.
And they've noticed that, especially now in COVID, that they and their employees are getting more reactive.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So there are certainly people, like I myself included. So I am a mindfulness coach. So there are mindfulness coaches, there are mindful leader training programs. There are a ton of resources. And so in some organizations, they themselves, the leaders get trained, and then they can then train their staff. Others will bring in mindful leadership trainers that could do, maybe it's a one-time training for your staff. Maybe it's a 6-week program, virtual or in person, where everyone's able to go. And then you then keep that momentum going once the training is over internally. So there's certainly organizations. There is a really great book called The Mindful Leader. So there are a lot of organizations, but there are also a lot of private coaches like myself who do this with one-on-one clients or group programs.
Excellent. Is it possible that during an acute crisis, you can't be mindful because you just need to survive? And that when you are ready, you can be mindful about the traumatic situation you just went through and use mindfulness to unpack it afterwards?
Absolutely. That, I think you answered your question. You were right on. So yes, again, mindfulness isn't about every second of every day. And it's also not about ignoring the really stressful, traumatic, overwhelming moments. And sort of, I like to think of it, and you hear this a lot in the wellness and spiritual world, like light and love over it. So I'm just going to say, slap an affirmation on it and pretend it's not happening. That is the least mindful thing that you can do. So there are times where we need that fight and flight response. We need to be triggered. We need to rush into action. We need to get out of a stressful situation. And exactly what the question said, then you can use mindfulness to process everything that happened in the moment, to allow yourself to sit with it, to deal with it, right? So it's sort of like you're suppressing everything in the moment because you really do have to spring into action. And if you stopped and paused and started to meditate, that probably wouldn't be the best thing for the group. But then returning to that practice, having a journaling practice, having a gratitude practice, allowing yourself to just, breathe and maybe cry it out, can be really, really powerful. So I think that is a really important question. It's, again, not about pretending or sort of closing our eyes to the stressful things going on in our life or in the world, But by having a practice, then you're able to actually show up for those things and be able to manage those stressful moments with a little more ease.
We have an attendee who was recently watching the Michael Jordan documentary, and they were surprised to see how the Chicago Bulls coach used mindfulness with the team to help them be more successful, and that it really worked. In your research, can you think of other examples where there are kind of out-of-the-box ways that mindfulness has been used?
Yeah, so I also saw that documentary and plan on using those clips. And I teach a course at UNH Manchester called the Mindful Leader for students in a leadership program. So there are a lot of examples. Sports is actually a huge one where a lot of coaches are incorporated in. So Pete Carroll, who's the coach of the Seattle Seahawks football team, brings in a lot of mindful leadership. A lot of corporations bring it in, and it's not necessarily always bringing in a meditation practice, although I think that can be really powerful. It can also be thinking about, when I was researching for the Mindful Leadership course, Eileen Fisher, who is a clothing designer and she has a clothing brand, she brings mindfulness into her leadership and into her corporation by really focusing on compassion and ethics and thinking about how the garment is made, how people are treated, the whole process. And so that's how she incorporates mindfulness. She doesn't necessarily, meditate with her team every day, but in their conversations around the goals and the priorities and the values of their company, they're bringing in a lot more compassion and empathy and emotional intelligence. So I think there are a lot of creative ways. I think we often just think of we have to meditate in the workplace, but it's not necessarily just that.
And I think just one more question at the moment before we move on, and that's, I actually think earlier you mentioned Headspace, but this individual is asking, do you use any phone apps to assist with meditation or mindfulness? Any you recommend maybe outside Headspace?
Yes, great. And I'm going to address that in a couple of slides. I'm going to have a whole list of some resources for you, and I'll make a note to make sure I talk specifically about the apps. So that's a great question.
Thank you.
It is a way that you can actually be mindful with your phone, which is great. And I think that's a perfect transition into the next part of our webinar, which is now that we sort of know how mindfulness can help us, how do we actually do it? And how do we do it in our very busy and stressful lives? So I really like this graphic from mindful.org. They're a really great website and resource for mindfulness and meditation. They also have a magazine. And so this is by no means sort of a checklist that you have to do. These are just some guiding principles that I think can be helpful, especially if you're just getting started. So the first one is find a place to practice your mindfulness. It says take a seat. I say find a place where you're comfortable, right? And I've meditated standing up, sitting down, lying down, on the floor, against the wall, in a chair, in my car. So ideally, it would be calm and quiet, but we don't always live in the ideal. I have a friend, and I'm going to share one of her resources in a few slides, who is a mother of 5, and she wrote a book on mindfulness that I'm going to recommend to everyone, but she will be meditating in her laundry room while the dryer is going, or in the bathroom, or sitting in her car parked in her driveway where she takes 4 minutes out of her day to just spend some time with herself. So take a seat or stand up or lie down, whatever's going to be comfortable for you. And the next one, set a time limit. I think this is a very important one, especially if you're just getting started. You want to set a time limit, but also an actual timer. Because what you will find is if you're sitting down to meditate for the first time or journal for the first time, 1 minute is going to feel like 10 minutes or an hour, or it's going to feel like a while, right? Because this is not what we're necessarily used to. We're used to multitasking, going, wearing stress as a badge of honor. And so it sort of is counter to our normal state in the society that we live in to slow it all down, which is why it can feel like it's taking a little bit longer. And so it's just one more distraction. I hear this a lot from people. Oh, I thought I was meditating for like an hour. And then I looked up and it had been 2 minutes. So by setting a time limit and a timer, then it's one less thing you have to think about. You'll just know that time's not up until the timer has gone off. You don't have to think about how long has it been? Am I going to be late for my next meeting? I have to get started with dinner. You'll know, okay, I set a timer for 3 minutes and it hasn't gone off, so it hasn't been 3 minutes yet. And then you want to notice your body. So whether this is meditating or any other mindfulness practice, again, you want to be aware in the present moment. And one of the easiest ways to do that is doing number 3 and 4, noticing how you physically feel in your body. So maybe you're taking a mindful walk. How do your feet feel as they hit the ground? How do your clothes feel? How does the air coming on your skin feel? And then feel your breath. A very easy way to do this, and you can do this in a formal meditation practice or just any random time during your day, is just to put a hand on your belly and a hand on your chest and just feel your breath, right? So you're not trying to manipulate or change it. You're just trying to feel the inhale and feel the exhale. Ideally, on the inhale, your belly and then your chest expand. And on the exhale, it all contracts, emptying out. That is the most simple mindfulness practice. If you take away a little else from this webinar, just knowing that, like whenever you're in a stressful moment, put your hand on your belly and a hand on your heart and just breathe. And then 5 and 6 go back to that present moment awareness without judgment. So notice when your mind has wandered, because it's going to, but also don't get fixated on it. So don't allow those thoughts to take you out of your mindful moment. Don't start to then have that thought lead to the next thought, lead to the next thought. I like to just envision like you're sitting on the bed of a river and your thoughts are just coming down the river slowly, and you can see them, notice them, but you're not jumping into the river to grab onto them. You're not holding on to so many that then they take you down the river. And again, the goal is not to empty your mind or turn off your thoughts. The goal is to just allow your thoughts to be thought. And there are tons of ways that you can live mindfully that include meditation and don't. And so I'm going to highlight just a couple from this list that I think would be great places to start. One of them is wake up in the morning and have a tech-free morning for as long as possible. And if right now you wake up and reach for your phone sort of on autopilot, maybe try and have tech-free for the first 30 minutes of your day. And if that seems like too much, maybe it's the first 5 minutes of your day. But one great mindfulness practice is journaling, and a really great approach to that is Julia Cameron's Morning Pages. She wrote The Artist's Way, and Morning Pages is in the first thing in the morning before you've done anything else. You just write 3 pages, no prompt, no topic, you just write. And it's a way to start your day fully present in the moment. If your world is a lot like mine right now and you're spending more time on Zoom than you ever thought you would, a really great mindfulness strategy for a Zoom meeting is to set it to speaker view only so that you only see the person who's talking and that you close everything else. So your email is closed, whatever that project was you were working on is closed, and you're only focusing on the person who is actually talking. And that's one of the other ones on the list is embracing monotasking. We are a multitasking world. It's often something we say is our strength. I'm a great multitasker. I would like more people to say that their strength is that they are a really great monotasker. And that is a way to be mindful. So work on one thing at a time. So if you're making dinner, be making dinner. Don't be making dinner and listening to a podcast. Just be present with the experience of making dinner. Along with being present, as much as possible, turn off all of your notifications. I don't know if this is your experience, but I'll be working on a project and then I'll see in the little corner of my computer screen the little pop-up that I have an email. even if I don't go over and check the email, I know I have another email. And as they come in, I'm sort of mentally counting, okay, I got five emails, okay, 10 emails. And it just takes you out of the present moment. A really great gratitude practice that I like is this idea of keeping a gratitude jar. I got this idea from Elizabeth Gilbert, who is the author of Eat, Pray, Love, and Big Magic. And she keeps this giant gratitude jar, and every day she writes something she's grateful for. And on New Year's Eve every year, she opens up her jar and reads all of her gratitude from the previous year. So that's a great practice to do with your family. You can also do it with your team at work. Maybe you don't do it every single day, you write something down, but maybe once a week, everyone on the team is asked to write something that they're grateful for about their job or their colleague and put it in the jar. And then every now and then at a staff meeting, you go through and read those anonymous things. Brene Brown has a lot of great resources, but shortly after the pandemic started and we all transitioned, many of us transitioned to remote, she said she started asking her team at the beginning of every meeting to use 2 words to describe how you're feeling right now. And that takes you away from just saying, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Where you'll get good, fine, but 2 concrete words. Can be a really great way for everyone very easily to be mindful in the moment. And then a few other practices. This is a great idea on being mindful about how you consume news. So I like to think of being mindful about the volume you consume, but also after you've watched a podcast, read an article, watched the news, check in with yourself. How did that information make you feel? Are you stressed, hopeful, inspired, angry? And take a few deep breaths, release any tension in your body. This is a really great grounding technique called the 5 senses, and just in the moment where you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed. This is really great if you or someone you know suffers from panic attacks. You just in the moment list 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 that you can hear, 2 that you can smell, and 1 that you can taste. And it immediately grounds you into your body. And then 2 more simple ones, the stop technique. So you stop, so you step away from your computer, you disengage from a conversation, you take a breath, you observe how you're feeling, how you're thinking, and then you proceed. You think, what would be the next right action? And then box breathing is this last graphic where you breathe in, hold, breathe out, and hold for the same number of counts. 4 is what you generally see. I have found that 4 can feel like a really long time if you're brand new to box breath, so start with 2 or 3. And then getting to the question previous, what are some resources? These are 2 great books on mindfulness. You have 4 Minutes to Change Your Life and The Practice. But some apps, there are a ton of mindfulness apps, a lot. There are some great free ones and some that are paid. I personally use 2 or 3. Calm is a great one. Insight Timer is my favorite meditation app because it has a lot of free meditations and lectures. They also have a paid version. Another one that's totally free that I didn't include on here is called Oak, and it's super simple. It has a timer, really easy graphics, and then some calming music. So it's pretty basic, but totally free. It doesn't have any pop-ups or in-app purchases, so I really like that one. Happy Feed is a gratitude app, so you can write down 3 things every day that you're grateful for. There are great card decks. This is a great way to bring mindfulness in to working with students, working with your team. You can, at the beginning of a staff meeting, have everyone just pull a card. So 2 that I like are Mindfulness on the Go, and the other one is called Mindfulness Cards, which is kind of a weird name. So it looks like this. It's super colorful. And you can just pull a card and then everyone can read it to themselves and then practice that mindfulness strategy. Journaling is a great mindfulness practice. So here are 2 that I really like because they have a lot of prompts. So if you don't know what to write, this can be really helpful. And then thinking about bringing mindfulness into working with children. That I work with college students, so I don't use these resources, but I personally know them all. So one is my friend, Rebecca Barucki, who wrote You Have 4 Minutes to Change Your Life. She also has a series of mindfulness books for children. The first one that came out was called Zara's Big Messy Day that turned out okay. And so it's all about teaching children through story how to bring some mindfulness exercises into their life. There are in the center these two beautifully illustrated card decks for children from Little Renegades. One's called Mindful Kids, and the other one is Mindful Kids Bedtime. So that is similar to the cards I explained that you could use with your team, or I use them with college students, but this would be for children. And then Dr. Christopher Willard is a Boston-based child psychologist who is also a mindfulness educator, and he has a whole series of books on mindfulness for children, but the breathing book is his most recent book. And then we'll quickly talk about some roadblocks before we move into a very short mindful moment, and then I'll answer any more questions that we have. So this sounds great. It sounds great. You want to be a better problem solver, more calm, have a stronger immune system. What's going to get in your way? Pretty much everything, unless you actively work for it not to. Again, we spend all of that time in autopilot. So here are some common things that I find in working with clients. Not scheduling it into your day. Just like anything else, if you don't schedule it in, it's just not going to happen. It's going to be, oh, okay, yeah, I didn't do my morning meditation, but I'll do it when I get home from work. And then you're tired, you have to make dinner, you're spending time with your family, and then you're like, oh, well, I don't want to, it's either I'm going to stay up later just to meditate or I'll go to bed. So schedule it in. So whether that's doing the morning pages or on your lunch break, setting aside 5 minutes to go outside, put headphones in and just breathe. Maybe it's, I have friends who, when they get home from work, they just sit in their car for 5 minutes and just meditate before they go in, and sort of it allows them to mentally wash off the day. Another roadblock is only practicing mindfulness when things are hard or stressful. The goal is to practice it when things are not hard or stressful, so that when things are hard, you are more practiced and you more naturally gravitate towards it. Right? If you only meditate when things are hard, then meditation will be hard. So I had a mindfulness teacher who once said, you should meditate the most when things are the best in your life. Another roadblock is the discomfort. So the physical discomfort and or the emotional discomfort. So for the physical, I am not a meditation teacher who believes that you have to breathe through the pain. So if you're uncomfortable, if you're trying to meditate and your back is feeling unsupported or your legs falling asleep, just move. You want to be comfortable. And again, like we talked about earlier, it's okay if you're not only having positive thoughts while you practice mindfulness. So it's okay if you find your eyes sort of tearing up and releasing tears while you meditate. That is actually great, because you're allowing emotions that are bottled up to actually move through your body and move out of your body. Getting distracted by your distractions. So as much as possible, try to reduce distractions, but also just let them be. I'll be meditating and my dog will come over and start licking my face or jump in my lap, or then, they might be mowing the lawn outside or a really big truck goes by. So just allow that to move through, but not really get hung up on it. Another one is this idea of negativity bias. We love the negative, right? And so we just tend to register things that are bad or negative or stressful more, and we dwell more on them. And so being mindful, you might find that at first, one, you have a negativity bias about being mindful. You think it's not going to work, and that you don't have time for it. But also you might find, as you quiet things down, slow down, that you are thinking more of those, processing more of those negative thoughts at the beginning, and that is perfectly okay. Another roadblock is expecting it to be easy or perfect. Like I said, I've been doing this for more than 10 years. I still don't think it's easy, and I'm still not perfect at it, but I still have to practice at it every day. I still will slide very far away from being mindful, and then I have to come back to myself. And often, also, it's forgetting what mindfulness is. Again, it's not turning off all of your thoughts. It's not pretending like everything is great all of the time. It's back to that very basic definition at the beginning. It's about practicing attention, awareness in the present moment on purpose without judgment. That's all it is. Okay. And before we pop into our mindful moment, I could take a few more questions if there's any.
We do have a few.
Great.
So one question they have is, would you have any specific programs for adolescents? This person's used Breathe in the past. Over the past 3 years, I've created my own mindfulness practices to use with my high school students, always looking for additional tools.
Yeah, so for younger children, I really like Christopher Willard's books and resources because the illustrations are really cute. He has one, I think it's called Alpha Breathix, I think something like that. But it's every letter is a different mindfulness practice. For adolescents, using technology, I think, can often be really helpful. I bring that into the classroom when I'm teaching it to the college students. So using things like the free mindfulness apps can be really useful. Also incorporating music. I've had students who have given it the old college try with mindfulness and meditation, and they still aren't connecting to it. And then I'll say, okay, why don't you just put on your favorite song and just listen to it? Like, well, but what if my favorite song is like a rap song or a heavy metal song? That's okay. It doesn't have to be a mantra song. But if you just don't do anything else and just listen to the music, the lyrics, and just breathe, that can be a really great way to get people more engaged. I think, again, just making it more simple, incorporating technology where you can. We're tied to our phones so much anyway. So using apps like that. There are a lot of apps, and I am happy to create a more extensive list and then share that. So when this is recorded, when the recording is posted, I'm happy to create a more extensive list of all of the different mindfulness resources, both apps and other things. So I can put that together for everyone.
Excellent. Thank you. And this is kind of similar to one of the first questions we had about kind of people who maybe aren't not really their thing, but we have someone who is asking for suggestions for introducing these concepts to their student, an incoming UNH freshman. It's a young man who may have no experience and might be hesitant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for people who have no experience and might be hesitant, the way that I found that works the best is to talk about it from the stress angle. I think we all feel stressed more often than we would like. And so talking about creating a stress management practice or a way to feel calmer with college students, an angle that often works for them, in my experience, is the stress and also the focus and the productivity. So helping them see that this is a really good sort of time management tool to allow them to be more productive when they do have a study session or they're writing a paper. So again, you don't ever even have to mention mindfulness or meditation, but if you're teaching the concepts, if you're teaching, okay, when you are feeling really overwhelmed, take a step back and just take a deep breath. When you are trying to work on an assignment and you just have a million things running through your mind, okay, step away from the assignment and just write them all down. When you're having trouble sleeping, list out 3 things that you're grateful for. And so you're sort of teaching them to be mindful without telling them necessarily that they are being mindful, is what I found can work the best.
And we do have 2 more questions, but I think they're best suited for the end.
Okay, great. Okay, so we will, and this is a mindful moment. So again, it's only going to be a brief experience, but I just want to give you a minute or 2. And so you can simply look at this image as it expands on the inhale and shrinks on the exhale. So you could try and sync your breathing in with the inhale, out with the exhale. In with the inhale, out with the exhale. If it feels safe and you feel comfortable doing so, you could maybe close your eyes. And just right here, right now, wherever you are, whatever distractions may be around you, notice how you feel physically, emotionally. Bring your awareness to your breath. Maybe you do practice putting your hand on your belly, your other hand over your heart. You fill up on the inhale and let it all go on the exhale. Continuing to breathe. You can silently recite inhale and exhale if that helps you. Keep your intention and focus on your breath. And as we transition out of our mindful moment, you can allow your breathing to return to normal. You can flutter your eyelids open if they were closed. And you can notice if even this simple 2.5 or 3 minutes of breathing has helped slow things down, clear out the cobwebs. And if even in that very short time you experienced any of those benefits that I talked about. Okay, I am happy to take the remaining questions as people transition out of their mindful moment.
Excellent. Well, that felt good. It's been a while since I've done a mindful moment.
It always feels good to even to breathe for 30 seconds. I think we forget how much power is in our breath, especially in stressful moments. When you're stressed, your breathing is very shallow and very quick. And so it just keeps you in that stress cycle and stress response. So in the stressful moments, by taking a deep, expansive breath, you instantly calm everything down.
Yeah, things to remember. We actually have an alum from 1997 who's actually curious if there's a way to maybe audit your UNH course or getting more information on that course. So I think that might be something maybe we could send out in our follow-up email to everybody.
Sure, yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I teach it in the spring.
Excellent. Okay, fantastic. And then we have a question here that, are there things that COVID-19 can teach us about mindfulness? Maybe some of the practices that we can use.
Yeah, I think I was teaching the mindful leader when this all happened. And so our whole course ended up being about thinking about bringing mindful leadership into this scenario. So it was a really good real life case study. But I think some of the takeaways for me, especially so many people have been transitioned home, and you are being forced to slow down a little bit more if you are fortunate enough to be able to work from home. And so what I've heard from a lot of people is that there has been a lot of discomfort because the things that you normally are distracting yourself by, working late hours or always staying busy, like having a very packed calendar, interacting with a lot of other people who are not yourself, we don't hear ourselves think. And so a lot of people have commented to me that they've had a lot of time to be with themselves and their own thoughts. And that's not always super comfortable. So I've recommended, and I've in this time really ramped up my own mindfulness practice, both to process the feelings of grief, of overwhelm, of anger, of just feeling the unknowing. So I've been practicing more of that free writing journaling. I certainly have been meditating more to just allow myself to acknowledge everything that's going on in the moment. So that's something that I've been recommending. And then I also have noticed just instinctively, I felt like I needed to really ramp up my mindfulness to be able to manage this very global, stressful moment.
We have a question about breathing. Is there a certain way to breathe? In yoga, sometimes they say to expand your stomach, then ribs, then chest. Then as you breathe out to do the reverse. Does it matter as long as you're taking deep breaths?
So it doesn't matter. I personally don't think it matters that much, as long as you are still feeling good in your breathing. So you don't want to be breathing in a way or breathing so deeply that you start to get a little lightheaded, right? So I often talk, and when I'm doing a guided meditation, I often say, like, breathe however is natural for you. And maybe you try and make it a little bit longer or a little bit deeper. In general, along with that yogic breath, that is often the breath that is taught in a meditation class, is that, and that's where putting your hand on your stomach and your chest can be really helpful to guide this, is as you inhale, whether it's in through your nose or through your mouth, generally it's recommended it's in through your nose, that you feel your belly expand first as it moves into your chest. And then same with that yogic breath, as you exhale, you're feeling your chest go down, and then you feel your stomach contract. But again, in thinking about sort of those 6 steps to practicing mindfulness, you want to be comfortable. You also want to not get fixated on your thoughts. So if all you're thinking about is, oh my gosh, should my stomach just expand or contract on the inhale, then you're really not practicing mindfulness. You're practicing focused breathing. So if it feels natural for you, expanding on each inhale and contracting on each exhale is the most restorative and supportive breath. But a lot of people, their starting place is the opposite. And so I think, observing that, getting curious about that, and then allowing it over time to change can be really helpful.
Excellent. And then we just have got a few comments come through saying thank you very much. We have someone here saying thank you for your time. They're new to UNH community and they have a daughter coming in to UNH Durham in the fall, and they can feel the kindness and compassion she'll be surrounded with already. Just wants to wish you a great day.
Thank you so much.
We've had a lot of great little comments. And then just a point of clarification, someone was just curious if your website is Spirited Wellbeing or Sprited Wellbeing.
Oh yes, thank you for catching that. It is Spirited Wellbeing.
Okay, excellent. So I think they want to check out more information. Excellent.
And my podcast is linked right from there. And you can also search for it on just Rethinking It anywhere you listen to your podcast. It will pop right up.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. Those are all the questions. We've had many just quick, like people pop in and say thank you so much, and a lot of great tools, and so very appreciative from the audience. So thank you so much for your time. And
well, thank you everyone who took an hour out of your time to be mindful. I think that is huge.
Yes.
So I think we all should take a really deep breath as we move into the next part of our day.
I think a lot of folks on the call are agreeing. Anyway, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll stay in touch. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much.